Hello, my name is Matthew McKnight and I'm with the IT department. And today we're going to look at multi-factor authentication, which is the ability to add an extra layer of security for access to our important information, our member-sensitive data. What we're going to cover in this video are three main things. First of all, we're going to take a look at what is multi-factor authentication. You have already been using it, I'm sure, by this point, when you get text messages with codes from your bank that you have to put in, for example. But I want you to understand some of the ideas behind it so you can see how we have to layer these things. Secondly, we're actually going to add an Authenticator app to our phone. This can be very, very useful. It's a way to achieve security while minimizing the inconvenience that it will bring about. So we're going to look at two Authenticator apps. One is the Microsoft Authenticator and the other is the Google Authenticator. We'll talk about that when we get to that point. And then I'm actually going to demonstrate using both of those. First, we're going to use the Microsoft Authenticator, and then we're going to use the Google Authenticator to access the information, and thus using multi-factor authentication to secure our members' information. And to understand what that means, we're going to talk about the three main factors of multi-factor authentication. The one that we are most familiar with over time is what you know. This is your password or your ATM PIN. It is something that you can have and write down, which is part of the problem. If you write it down or you enter it into an email or to a website, then somebody else can grab that and use it. The second is what you have. For example, your phone number. If a bank sends you a text with a code that you have to enter in, that is saying that you have that phone number. It doesn't know which phone it's on, but it knows that the number is the one that has the code. The problem is, with things like SIM swaps, that isn't as secure as we might like. The third main factor of multi-factor authentication is generally who you are. And this is biometric data. So your fingerprint, or as is very common now with smartphones, facial recognition. Of these three, and this should not be a shock, the worst type of security is what you know, because you can write that down or you can enter it into a website. It is something which you can lose track of. Better security, good security, let's say, would be what you have. There are ways, for example, using a thing called SIM swap to get your phone number, but generally it's a lot more difficult to actually do a SIM swap than it would be to have somebody enter in their information to a bogus website. Better security would be what you are. Obviously, your face is a lot more difficult to get than your password. But the best security is a combination of two or more of these, and that is what multi-factor authentication does. It uses the layering of two or more of these to make it much, much more difficult to hack. If you go to a bogus website and enter in your username and password, they have what you know. But if they also need to have who you are, for example, or what you have, they're going to be stymied. So that sounds great. It sounds wonderful, but we run into the issue of safety versus convenience. It's part of our everyday life. If you have boarded a plane, or if you have used an ID card, or if you have even just locked your car, there is a struggle between safety and convenience. How do you maintain a high enough level of safety without making it so inconvenient that you avoid doing those very things, or it detracts from what you're trying to accomplish? In the area of multi-factor authentication, I'm going to strongly recommend Authenticator Apps. Just as you have really, unfortunately, smart people trying to hack into your system, there are also equally smart people designing methods that will prevent them without creating an undue burden upon you. Authenticator apps, such as the Microsoft Authenticator and the Google Authenticator, provide minimal inconvenience with maximum security. And we're going to go through and I'm going to demonstrate how to add them and how to use them so you can see what I mean by that. My personal recommendation is you use the Microsoft Authenticator app because it gives you more flexibility over how you do things. The approval is much easier than having to use what's called this recurring number, this constantly changing number. However, if you like Google or you are already using Google Authenticator for other things, you can use Google Authenticator as well to access Microsoft 365 stuff. So, without further ado, let's actually add these authenticators to our phones and then use them to log in so you can see how effectively they work. So the next section will involve setting up a Microsoft Authenticator app and a Google Authenticator app so you can see the process by which it is done. Before we begin, I want to go over the steps so you're just kind of aware of how we're working. One thing to note is you're going to be bouncing back and forth a little bit between the web page where your security info is for Microsoft 365 and your phone where the Authenticator app of your choice is. The steps follow like this. First thing you're going to have to do is install the Authenticator app of your choice on your phone, either in this case Microsoft Authenticator or Google Authenticator. I'm actually going to have both. Secondly, you're going to go onto a web page which has your account settings for O365. There's two ways to do it. There's a button you can click on the Me site, or if you're in like the How site or in SharePoint or OneDrive, in the top right, you'll see a profile image of yourself. And from there, you can choose View Account, which will both take you to the same page. That is your My Account page for Office 365. When you get in there, you're going to click on the Security Info panel, specifically the Update Info link. That will bring about a two-factor authentication verification of your identity. It'll probably send an SMS text to your phone. And then once you get past that, you'll be in the place where you can actually add methods of authentication. You're going to click on Add Method. You're going to select Authenticator App, which is probably going to be your only choice. And then you're either going to choose Next or you're going to choose I want to use a different Authenticator app for non-Microsoft Authenticator apps. When you do this, Microsoft will generate what's known as a QR code on your web page screen. A QR code is like the barcode that you use when you go to the grocery store. It's a way to get the information across without having to tap it in all the time. And this QR code will contain your information, which the Authenticator app will need. So once you have that, we're going to flip over to the phone. We're going to open up the Authenticator app. We're going to choose to add an account, and then we'll get to choose to scan a QR code. Now, just note, in order to do this, you're going to have to give approval to the app to use your camera because it can't stand what it can't see. Not a big deal. Once we do that, we're almost done. It's the final stretch. And the final thing we need to do is we need to connect the web page to the app. So we will return to the web page where your My Account information is. If you're using the Microsoft Authenticator, it will automatically move forward and submit an approval to your Authenticator app, which you can then approve on your phone to make the connection. However, if you're using a different third-party authenticator like Google Authenticator, you'll have to click Next and then enter in the 6-digit verification code. This will verify that the app that you're using is the app that you want to set up here, and you will be done. You can then select any of the Authenticator apps you have set up as your default method, or you can also use them as a fallback. Now, if all those steps seem a little overwhelming, just take a deep breath. It actually is a fairly simple process. So let's get started, and I'll walk you through the process, and you'll see how straightforward it actually is. As I mentioned, there's two ways to get to the web page you need. In the Me site, you can click on the My Account button under your profile, or if you're in OneDrive or SharePoint, in the top right, you'll see your icon. You can click on that and choose View Account. Both of those will take you to the same page, which is the My Account for Microsoft 365. And we're going to go into the Security Info section and click on Update Info. And it will probably prompt you for multi-factor authentication. In this case, it's going to offer to send me a text to my cell phone. When I get that text, I'm going to put in the number, and then I'm going to click on Verify to get to the page where I can actually add the different authentication methods. Currently, I have both a phone and an email. but I want to add the Authenticator app. So I'm going to go up to the Add Method and click on that. And when I click on that, I'll be given a drop down of choices, only one of which is available to me, and that is Authenticator app. So I choose the Authenticator app, and then I choose Add. And because I'm going to be doing the Microsoft Authenticator, I'm going to click Next here. If I were doing the Google Authenticator, I would click on a different link. I would click I want to use a different Authenticator app, but I'm doing the Microsoft Authenticator, so I simply will click Next. Doing so will allow me to begin the process to set up the account. And clicking Next will actually generate a QR code that I talked about. It's the barcode for your account. So the Authenticator app has something to look for. So at this point, we're done with the web page. We're going to flip over to our phone. We're going to open up the app, and we're going to continue from there. All right, now we're going to open up the Authenticator app on our phone. And when we do so, we're going to be prompted up at the back. If you can click Continue for that. And then we're going to click Add Account and choose Work or School Account. And this is where we're going to make use of that QR code. When we click Scan QR code, it's going to ask us if this application can use our camera. We have to say yes, because it can't scan what it can't see. We're going to point the camera at the web page. We're going to click OK. It'll see the QR code. We'll allow it to send us notifications. And then we're pretty much done right now with the phone. So this part has been connected. We're going to go back to the web page. And here, we're going to click Next. Doing so will begin the process of verifying. So what it's going to do is send an approval request back to our phone. So we're going to have to flip back to the phone, and we're going to click on Approve. And when we do, that'll wire the two of them together. So we're done here, and when we go back to the web page, you will see that the approval is finished, everything is fine. We click Next, and now we have set up our Microsoft Authenticator. We can now use that as one of our authentication methods. Setting up the Google Authenticator is very, very similar with subtle changes. Again, what we're going to do is select the Add Method. Clicking on that gives us the drop-down. In the drop-down, we choose Authenticator App, and we're going to click Add. But this time, we're not going to choose Next because we want to use a third-party authenticator. We're going to choose I want to use a different Authenticator app. When we click that, it begins a similar process, but subtly different. So again, set up your account, we click Next, and it generates a QR code. All right, so now what we do, we go back to our phone, we open up Google Authenticator, we click on the Get Started so we can add the account, and then we say Scan a QR code, just like before. Again, we're going to have to give access to our camera. We're going to click OK, and it's going to quickly scan the QR code because we pointed our camera at the web page. Only this time what it's going to do is give us what's called the verification code. That's the 6-digit number that you see on there. To the right, in the red box, you'll see the countdown timer. You have 30 seconds to put that code in, but don't stress out about it. It is synchronized. So if I wait, right now I could put in 663263, but if I wait for a few moments, it's going to roll over. And then if I put that code in, it will work just as well. So if you get to the point where you're kind of running out of time with the timer, take a deep breath, relax, let it run out, and then put in the next code. I'm not going to go into the technical way of how they're all synchronized, but right now, the code on the web page is waiting for this number and not the one before. So let's go to the web page. Let's put in that new number. We're going to click Next, and I'm going to type in 316213 and choose Next. And that's it. Now we have set up the Google Authenticator as an Authenticator app on here. Now we don't have a default sign-in method. Normally it would have been the phone, but I was mucking around, so it wiped out. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set up the default sign-in method to phone again, and then I'm going to show you how to set it to one of the authenticators because they're much easier, I think, than using the phone. So I choose default sign-in method, and in this case, I'm going to choose phone. So now it's set to phone. Well, again, I'm going to click on change. Same place I was before, only this time I'm going to choose Microsoft Authenticator. And when I do that, and I choose confirm, now by default, when I have to do multi-factor authentication, it's going to use my Microsoft Authenticator app to verify who I am. And I will demonstrate how that works in the next section. But right now we are done setting up our Authenticator apps for multi-factor authentication. The next step is actually to use them. Now that we have multi-factor authentication set up with our Authenticator apps, we can actually see it in action. So we're going to use first the Microsoft Authenticator, which is our default authentication mode for logging into the house site. And then we're going to actually fall back upon the Google Authenticator, saying that we don't have access to our Microsoft Authenticator, and use that to enable us to log in to the We site. I should definitely mention that when we're logging onto the house site and the We site, I'm actually logging out in between. So when you log into the house site, if you go to the We site, you should not have to log in again. This is just for demo. So we'll see first how to do it with approval via the Microsoft Authenticator, and then also with the verification code through the Google app. Note also, on a side note, you can actually use the verification code from the Microsoft Authenticator. It can do both the approval and the verification code. It's just the approval is simpler. So we're going to start by going to the how.edmn.org, and it's going to be very familiar to what you would normally do. You put in your email address as your username, and then you put in your password, just like you normally do. But now we're going to do the final step, the extra layer of protection that happens. And in this case, it's going to ask us to approve via the Microsoft Authenticator app. Remember, that's our default, so that's where it goes first. When we go to our phone, you'll see that the approved sign-in pops up. That's a notification. And when we click on that, it will open up the Microsoft Authenticator and ask us to approve. Now note that we also have to put in a PIN. If you had facial recognition, that's even better. You can use facial recognition. And that way, this is a form of MFA. It's what you know and what you have, or what you are and what you have. Then we simply say approve, and we go here and we're signed in. So that's the extra step, is going to your phone and clicking approve with the biometric or the PIN. Now, the Google Authenticator is very simple. We're going to go to the we.edmn.org site, the We site, and in there, we're going to put in our username, which is our email address, and then we're going to also put in our password, just like we normally do. But this time, instead of saying approve, we're actually going to click on where it says, I can't use my Microsoft Authenticator app right now. That gives us a fallback method, and we're going to choose use verification code from my mobile app. This is where we're going to get the verification code from our Google Authenticator on our phone, and we're going to plug the 6-digit number in here. Note that if you're using Google Authenticator, you don't need to use the biometric or PIN. But when we go in there, you will see the 6-digit verification code that we need to put in. And so once we have that number, 875369, we're going to go over to our web page and plunk that number in there. And because they are synchronized, this will log us on. Again, you can choose whichever method you choose, either the Microsoft Authenticator or Google Authenticator. You could put them both in and simply select one of the other to be your default method. You can see how using an Authenticator app can be actually more secure, far more secure for our member data.